You see, we all love the mountaintop moments when everything feels right, when the sun is shining, when prayers are being answered and doors are opening. But what about the valley? What about the seasons when nothing seems to be going right? When people walk away, when your finances dry up, when your health takes a turn, when your confidence is shaking and your heart is breaking? What about those moments that feel like silence from heaven? Let me tell you something today. Just because you're in the valley doesn't mean you're defeated. Just because you're walking through a dry place doesn't mean you're disconnected. The valley is not the end. It's not the final chapter. It's a part of your journey. And in fact, it's a vital part. The valley is where strength is built, not shown. It's where purpose is carved, not celebrated. It's where you're shaped for the mountain you've been praying to stand on. We get so caught up thinking that the valley is punishment, that it's evidence we've messed up or fallen short. But what if it's not punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the valley is the proving ground? What if it's the place where God hides you to build you, to heal you, to protect you from something you didn't even know was coming? There's something sacred about the valley. It's where you're stripped of the distractions, of the applause, of the external validation. It's just you, your thoughts, your fears, your hopes in God. That's it. And it's in that silence, in that solitude, that you start to hear His voice in a different way. Clearer, deeper. You begin to realize that His presence was never tied to your circumstances. It was always with you. We tend to think that being in the valley means something's gone wrong. But maybe it means something is going right. Maybe it means you're on the path of growth, of elevation. Because no one climbs without first descending. No one rises without first being grounded. You don't build anything tall without first digging deep. So if you're in a valley season, I want to tell you it's not your burial. It's your planting. You're not being thrown away. You're being prepared to rise. But see, the real battle in the valley isn't the pain, it's the perception. It's how you see the valley that determines what you get out of it. If you see it as a dead end, you'll sit down and give up. But if you see it as a classroom, as training ground, as a tunnel instead of a tomb, you'll walk through it with a purpose. You'll endure with faith. You'll trust even when you don't understand, because you know the author of your story doesn't write tragedies without triumphs. And let me tell you this, God never starts something He doesn't intend to finish. If He allowed you to step into the valley, He's already prepared your way out. But He's not rushing you through it. He's working in you while you're in it. He's growing your patience, stretching your faith, pruning your heart. And I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's not what you prayed for. But sometimes the answer to your prayer comes dressed in a process you didn't expect. You've got to trust Him in the valley just as much as you do on the mountaintop. Because what He promised you still stands in the valley. His plan for your life didn't get canceled because of the struggle. The valley is part of the blueprint. It's necessary. It's sacred. It's building something in you that the mountaintop can never give you. Roots. And roots are what keep you grounded when the wind comes. Roots are what hold you steady when the blessings show up. Because if you get the blessing without the breaking, you won't be able to handle the weight of what you asked for. But if you let the valley teach you, stretch you, refine you, when you come out of it, you won't just survive. You'll soar. So no, the valley is not the end. It's a passage, not a prison. And if you keep walking, keep trusting, keep believing, you'll find that the same God who walks with you through the low places is the same God who lifts you to high places. You just have to keep moving, even when it hurts not. When you're in the valley, it's easy to lose sight of the promise. It's easy to forget what God whispered to your heart when everything around you now seems to contradict it. The darkness has a way of distorting your vision, your memory, and even your faith. And that's why I came to remind you, don't let the darkness in the valley make you forget the promise God made you in the light. See, it's in those quiet, sacred moments when you're filled with hope and purpose that God often plants something deep within you. A vision, a calling, a direction, but as soon as you step out to walk in that direction, here comes resistance. Here comes the storm. Here comes the delay, the rejection, the loneliness. And suddenly you begin to question whether you even heard God in the first place. You begin to doubt whether that promise was real or just wishful thinking. But here's the truth, faith isn't built on what you see, it's built on what you believe. And belief gets tested in the dark. You've got to remind yourself that God doesn't speak based on your feelings, He speaks based on His faithfulness. His word doesn't return void. His promises don't expire. But sometimes they have to be protected, especially in the valley. That's where the enemy will try to convince you to give up on what you were believing for. That's where your own mind will turn against you and try to talk you out of it. That's where people around you might even say, maybe this wasn't for you after all. But listen to me, just because your surroundings don't match your expectations doesn't mean God has changed his mind. God is not a man that he should lie. If he said it, he will do it. And if he showed it to you, even in a glimpse, even in a dream, then it's yours. But you've got to keep the promise alive when nothing else around you is breathing life into it. There are going to be moments when you have to speak life over your own vision. When no one claps for you. When nobody understands. When the path forward seems blurry and you don't have clarity. Those are the moments that separate the committed from the curious. The ones who trust the process from the ones who walk away when it gets painful. And let me be clear, it will get painful. The waiting will feel like it's breaking you. The silence will feel like abandonment. The time will stretch so long you'll think the dream died. But the valley is where the promise matures. It's where you develop the strength to carry what God wants to give you. Because God isn't just interested in giving you the promise, he's interested in making sure you're ready for it. You see, if he gave it to you too soon, you might mishandle it. If he opened the door before your character was refined, you might walk through it and crumble. But the delay isn't a denial, it's development. It's preparation. And while you're sitting in the dark, trying to figure out why nothing's happening, God is behind the scenes, arranging everything, aligning the right people, removing the wrong ones, closing doors that would have derailed you, protecting you from things you didn't even know were coming. So if you're in the valley and you feel like giving up, I dare you to hold on to what God told you. I dare you to revisit that promise, rehearse it, speak it out loud again. Remind yourself who gave it to you. Remind yourself that the one who authored your story is still writing the next chapter. And he doesn't leave stories unfinished. You might be walking through the valley of confusion, of brokenness, of fear, but that doesn't change what he said about you. That doesn't cancel the calling on your life. That doesn't rewrite the purpose he planted in your heart. And even when you can't trace his hand, you can trust his heart. Because he's never failed and he's not about to start with you. So no matter how dark it gets, don't let go of the promise. Don't let your valley talk you out of your vision. Don't let the pressure make you forfeit your purpose. God is still with you and the promise still stands. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in the valley season is try to take matters into your own hands. We get so anxious, so impatient, and so desperate for movement that we start trying to manufacture outcomes. We try to force doors open that God hasn't unlocked. We start manipulating situations, adjusting our values, compromising our peace just to feel like we're making something happen. But hear me, when you take control that belongs to God, you don't just delay the promise, you damage the process. There's a difference between preparation and control. Preparation is when you do what you can do while trusting God to do what only he can. But control says, God, you're not moving fast enough, so I'm going to fix this myself. Control says, I know better. Control says, I'll create a shortcut. And shortcuts always come at a cost. Because anything you build outside of God's timing, you'll have to maintain without his grace. That's why we end up exhausted. That's why we're frustrated. That's why we're burnt out. We're trying to hold up something that we weren't meant to carry. We prayed for God to move, and then when he didn't move the way we wanted wheeze. But movement without alignment is just motion. You might look busy, but you're not progressing. You're not growing. You're not in flow. You're just trying to control something that was never yours to handle in the first place. We've all been there. We've all had those moments where we tried to play God because waiting felt too hard. We tried to force relationships. We tried to cling to jobs that weren't aligned. We made decisions out of fear instead of faith. And then we asked God, why is this so heavy? It's heavy because it's not blessed. It's heavy because God never told you to pick it up. There's a reason the scripture says, "Be still and know that I am God." It's in the stillness that we learn surrender. It's in the stillness that we remember who's really in charge. And I'm not talking about being passive or lazy. I'm talking about spiritual stillness where your soul stops striving, where your heart stops trying to calculate every outcome, where you stop leaning on your own understanding and start resting in God's faithfulness. Because when you're in the valley, your vision gets cloudy, and when your vision is cloudy, your mwinjis become reactive. You start making moves out of pressure, not purpose. But the problem with pressure-driven decisions is they usually come with regret. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to rush what God is still refining. Let him work it out. You might not see the full picture yet, but that doesn't mean hot paint in it. He sees what you can. He knows what's ahead. And while you're focused on when, God is focused on who you're becoming in the process. Because if he gave you the blessing right now and your heart isn't ready to handle it, you could ruin the very thing you've been praying for. You don't need to create a miracle, just cooperate with it. Stay in position. Stay in obedience. Keep your heart soft and your hands open. That's the posture of trust. That's the posture of someone who understands that God's timing is never late, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's something I learned. When God is ready to move, he won't heed more manipulation, just your availability. He'll open the door so wide, no man can shut it. He'll make the way so clear, you won't have to guess. But you've got to be in a place of surrender so you don't sabotage coming. Surrender is the soil where peace grows. And peace is proof that God is in it. So let go of the need to control. Let go of the timeline you created. Let go of the pressure to perform. You're not falling behind, you're being set up. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. The valley may feel quiet, but trust me, God is working in the silence. And when he moves, it will be worth every moment you waited. You know, one of the hardest things about walking through a valley is dealing with the opinions and expectations of other people. When you're already wrestling with your own doubts, your own fears, your own insecurities, the last thing you need is someone else's voice trying to define your value in the middle of your struggle. But it happens. People will look at your situation, your delay, your detour, and they'll start drawing conclusions. If God was really with you, wouldn't things be different by now? Why are you still stuck? Why are you still waiting? And if you're not careful, you'll start believing that noise. But here's the truth. People will always try to label what they don't understand. They'll try to name your valley something God never called it. They'll say it's failure, but God calls it formation. They'll say you're being punished, but God is purifying you. They'll say you're done, but God says I'm not finished yet. So you have to make a decision. Are you going to let people define your valley, or are you going to let God refine you through it? The danger of listening to the wrong voices is that it distracts you from the voice that matters most. And when you're distracted, you become disoriented. You forget who you are. You forget what God spoke over your life. You forget that the valley doesn't disqualify you, it develops you. But when you're living to meet expectations instead of walking in alignment, you'll start moving in directions that God never told you to go. Some people won't understand your silence. They won't understand why you're not fighting back, why you're not posting your side of the story, why you're not proving them wrong. But you're not called to prove, you're called to trust. You're not called to explain, you're called to obey. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing and let God speak through the outcome. Because when he vindicates you, it leaves no room for doubt. People see the surface, but God sees the soil. They see the pause, but God sees the planting. You might feel buried, but you're not buried. You're not being planted for a greater purpose. You might be hidden, but you're not forgotten. And when the time is right, what God put in you is going to break through. But until then, don't allow the shallow opinions of others to uproot the deep work God is doing in your life. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You don't need everyone to agree with you. What you need is to stay rooted, stay grounded, stay obedient. Because the same people who question your valley will be the same people amazed by your victory. But that can't be your focus. You're not here to press people, you're here to be transformed. I know it's tempting to clap back, it's tempting to prove them wrong. It's tempting to show the world that you're still standing, still pushing, still grinding. But sometimes the loudest message is in your quiet confidence, that posture of faith, that steady walk, that peace that doesn't make sense. That's what speaks volumes. That's what sets you apart. Not noise, not revenge, not validation, but unwavering trust in the one who knows the whole story. And if people walk away while you're in the valley, let them. If they can't handle your brokenness, they don't deserve your breakthrough. If they only support you when you're winning, they were never for you in the first place. Some exits are necessary. Some silence is sacred. Some misunderstandings are divine protection in disguise, because God will remove what you think you need to give you what you truly need. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how God is writing your story. You don't have to defend your process. You just have to keep walking, even when it's hard. Keep believing, even when it's dark. Keep trusting, even when you're misunderstood. Because the valley isn't your final destination, it's the middle of the miracle. And when you come out, and you will come out, you won't just come out restored, you'll come out refined. You'll come out with clarity, with strength, with wisdom you didn't have before. But you've got to be willing to go through it without letting the voices around you drown out the voice within you. Because the opinion of man might echo, but the word of God endures. Let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them misunderstand. But don't let them move you. Keep your eyes fixed. Keep your heart steady. Because what God is doing in the valley is preparing you for a glory that won't need an announcement. It will speak for itself. One of the biggest mistakes we make when we're in a valley, when life feels heavy, uncertain, and we're searching for answers, is thinking that God has gone silent because he's forgotten us. But let me tell you something, silence does not mean absence. Just because you can't hear him doesn't mean he stopped speaking. Just because you don't feel him doesn't mean he walked away. Sometimes God's silence is part of his strategy. He's working behind the scenes, moving pieces you can't see, aligning things in your favor, but you've got to trust the silence. You ever been in a situation where you prayed, you cried, you worshiped, you did all the right things, and it's still, it felt like heaven had closed its doors. That's the test right there. That's the moment that reveals whether you trust God only when he speaks, or if you can trust him even when he doesn't. Because real faith isn't just built in answered prayers, it's forged in quiet seasons. It's formed when you're sitting in the waiting room of life and nothing makes sense, but you choose to believe anyway. You see, we live in a world that's addicted to noise, constant stimulation, instant feedback, non-stop notifications. So when God decides to slow things down, we panic. We think we must have done something wrong. We assume he's mad at us, but God isn't like people. He doesn't need to keep talking to prove he's present. He doesn't need to keep showing up the way he used to. Sometimes he'll withdraw his voice just to see if you've matured enough to still walk by faith, not by feelings. And in those silent seasons, it's easy to start doubting everything. You doubt your value, your direction. You question every decision you made. But I want to challenge you right now, don't let silence scare you. Let it strengthen you. Let it teach you to lean in, not back away. Because silence is often where the deepest transformation happens. It's in the quiet where God teaches you to stand on what he already said, not just what you feel today. You know what's wild? A teacher is always silent during the test. And maybe that's exactly what's happening. You're not being ignored, you're being tested. God wants to know, can you hold on when there's no sign? Can you worship without the goosebumps? Can you stay committed when you don't get a breakthrough overnight? Because if you can pass that test, the blessing on the other side will be something no one can take from you. Because it wasn't built on hype, it was built on trust. And here's the thing, silence doesn't mean you stop moving. It doesn't mean you curl up and wait for everything to fall in your lap. No, keep doing what you know is right. Keep sowing, even when you don't see the harvest yet. Keep praying, even when it feels like the words are just bouncing off the walls. Keep showing up, even if no one claps. Because obedience in the dark produces miracles in the light. Don't waste the silence complaining. Don't waste it doubting. Use it to get rooted. Use it to strip away every voice that isn't his. Use it to develop your character, your patience, your endurance. Because when you come out of the silence, you're going to speak with a different authority. You're going to walk with a different strength. And people won't understand where it came from, but you'll know. It came from trusting in the valley. It came from learning to listen when all you heard was stillness. Sometimes, silence is God's way of pulling you closer. When he stops answering the way you expect, it's an invitation to go deeper. To stop relying on your senses and start relying on your spirit. To stop needing confirmation from people and start standing on conviction from within. And that's where your power is. That's where your maturity is born. So don't be discouraged if you're in a silent season right now. It's not punishment. It's preparation. God is doing something in you that requires the noise to die down so you can finally hear what matters most. Keep walking, keep believing, keep trusting. Because when he speaks again, everything is going to shift. And when it does, you'll realize that the silence wasn't a curse, it was a setup. A setup for breakthrough, for clarity, for strength that the noise could never give you. When you're in the valley, one of the most dangerous things you can do is isolate yourself. That's when the enemy does his best work, when you're alone, when you're disconnected, when you're convinced that no one would understand what you're going through. And let me tell you something, that's a lie. Because even though valleys feel personal, even though the pain may be yours, you were never meant to go through it by yourself. There's a reason why we're called to community, to fellowship, to connection, because when life gets dark, you need light from someone else to help guide your way. But see, in the valley, pride can sneak in. Shame can sneak in. We start thinking, I don't want to be a burden, or they wouldn't get it, or I should be stronger than this. So we retreat. We disappear. We isolate. And the more we isolate, the more our minds become a playground for fear, for anxiety, for defeat. We start rehearsing lies in our head like they're truth. And before we know it, we build a prison for ourselves brick by brick, thought by thought, because we didn't reach out. Because we didn't let anyone in. Let me ask you something. Who do you call when you're not okay? And don't say nobody. If your answer is nobody, then we've got a problem. Because that's not how this is supposed to work. You weren't created to be a lone warrior, trying to fight battles with no backup. Even Jesus had people praying with him. Even he leaned into community. And if he needed it, what makes you think you don't? Some of the most powerful healing I've ever experienced didn't come from a miracle moment. It came from a conversation. Just being able to tell someone, I'm not okay right now, I'm struggling, I'm tired. I don't have it all figured out. That's where the shift starts. That's where strength begins to return. Not in pretending you're fine, but in being real enough to say, I need help walking through this. And the right people, they won't judge you. They'll walk with you. They'll speak life when you've got nothing left to say. Don't let your valley convince you that you're a burden. You're not. You are a human being navigating hard things. You are someone who's worthy of love, support, and compassion, even when you don't feel strong, especially when you don't feel strong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, I can't carry this by myself. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And I get it, people have disappointed you. Maybe you reached out before and were met with silence. Maybe you trusted someone and they let you down, but don't let past pain rob you of present support. There are people who care. There are people who will show up. And maybe you haven't found them yet, but doesn't mean they're not out there. Don't stop trying. Don't stop seeking connection just because you've been hurt. Healing flows through healthy relationships. This is why staying connected to a source greater than yourself matters. Not just to God, but to the people he sends. Because God often answers prayers through people. He comforts through community. He strengthens through relationships. And sometimes the breakthrough you're praying for won't come in your quiet time. Alone, it'll come when someone else speaks a word you didn't know you needed. When they remind you of who you are. When they call out the warrior and you've tried to bury. If the enemy can't destroy you, he'll isolate you. He'll get you to cut off your lifeline. Don't fall for it. Stay plugged in. Stay around people who remind you of your faith, not your faith. People who pray with you, not gossip about you. People who see beyond where you are and speak to where you're going. And sometimes you have to be that person for someone else too. It's not always about what you get. Sometimes your own healing accelerates when you're willing to pour into someone else, even while you're still bleeding. That's the paradox of grace. That in giving we receive. That in lifting others we often lift ourselves. So if you're in the valley right now, don't isolate. Don't retreat. Don't believe the lie that says you're too broken, too far gone, too much of a mess. You're not. You're human. You're growing. And growth, real growth, often happens in the context of community. You were never meant to walk through the valley alone. Let somebody walk with you.